Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We're still working out the hosting situation. We got a few other speakers that are coming in right now. I know we got Rich Robinson in there trying to get Earn Alliance to get you up on stage in a moment. We also got Rich Cabrera. Hope I got that right. Ready Player Rich with us today. So just give us just a couple more moments for us to get the crowd up here, and then I'm super stoked. This is an idea that I've been wanting to do for a while in terms of getting a bunch of game designers and people who have been in the game industry, both Web 2, Web 3 for a while, and just have an open conversation about, what is game design and what should we be thinking about as the Web 3 games start getting developed as we keep moving forward, because it's such a new industry, and it's, for me, like, the free to play market took years to mature, for free to play mobile games, free to play games. When League of Legends decided to go free to play, everybody thought they were crazy, and then look at who they are now. So yeah, just excited to talk about all this stuff. Let's just go ahead and just wait just a couple more minutes here. Yep. Maybe as we were waiting here, I'm not sure what's going on with the Earn Alliance and account, but I'm trying to take over the host here, so we can get people up. So thanks for your patience. Maybe Rich, while we're waiting, since you did get speaker, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly and talk about maybe a project you're working on and why you're passionate on the game design side.
Hey, yeah, how's it going? Yeah, I recently joined up on the game design side, so I've been working with Minute Society, but been spending a lot of time talking to a lot of different games and what they're looking at in terms of incorporating, Web3 aspects into um, the games and developing games around Web3 and the freedom to transact and asset ownership. And then also coming with novel approaches to making games that incorporate those things. And um, I think the different approaches and how people are tackling it and how people are coming up with solutions for including that into games and like building new experiences around it is what's exciting me the most.
Cool. It's nice to finally meet on stage here. I been just following you as a follower for a while, so super stoked to have you. You've been definitely sharing a lot of great stuff on Twitter. Haven't liked it enough, so definitely stoked to like kind of dive into this. Still working on getting co-host. Mary, are you there? All right. I'm back here. I got the co-host. I'm inviting Rich to come up as well. Sorry, it looks like we're had to upgrade my Twitter just in real time to get back up on stage. So sorry for the slow. There we go. We got Rich Robinson up here. Awesome.
Hello.
Welcome. Yo, thanks for the patience, everyone.
Oh, good.
So Rich, cool. So let's go on to Rich Robinson, man. Brief intro. I know we've spoken once. Super stoked to reconnect. So brief intro on yourself and what's your how your involvement on the Web3 game space and any design.
Awesome, possum. Yeah, thanks for having me. Rich Robinson. I'm entrepreneur in residence at Animoca Brands. I'm based in Bali, Indonesia. Spent 25 years in China as a serial entrepreneur. Started a mobile game company there in 2001. Sold that to Glue Mobile. Started another game infrastructure company. Sold that to Tencent. And I've been involved in the gaming space over the last quarter of a century or so. First game company was doing SMS games back in the day. And Animoca started as a game company back in 2014. And gaming is the tip of the spear, of course, right? 3.4 billion gamers, biggest community in the world. Most of them in Asia, most of them really very, very comfortable with virtual items and communities and online communities and using virtual currency. So we're super, super bullish. We have almost 400 companies in our portfolio. We're an operating company, but we, at our core, create our own games. But we have 400 companies we've invested in, and about a third to a half are gaming companies. So what I'm most excited this year about is Phantom Galaxies. It's a AAA game created by Blowfish Studios, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Animoca. Really pumped for what 2023 is going to bring.
Awesome. Thank you for that awesome context. So yeah, we have a few other speakers that are still trying to make it. So we will see once they come, but let's just get diving straight into this. So quick intro myself, Coop. I've been in the game industry for 20 years. If you count me making game mods when I was 9 years old, I used to mod StarCraft maps, which is how I got into coding. And then I evolved into modding MMORPGs and creating private servers. And then it evolved into creating our own game companies and done mobile games, PC games, casino games, real money casino games online in India. And now took a break and came back about 6 months ago into the Web3 game space. So I'm just excited to be here, seeing what has happened in the Web3 game space, even though there's so much controversy of where it's going to go. And yeah, just wanted to kind of get a few people together, and hopefully a few other people show up here soon, and just openly talk about game design and what are things that we should be wary of, and what are things that worked really well, and what are things that we're excited to experiment with moving forward. So I came up with a bunch of topics. Format of this host is going to be around essentially me asking questions to Rich, and a few other game designers that are going to show up here in a few. And when I say Rich, Ready Player One, Ready Player Rich. I brought Rich Robinson here is kind of like more of a poker. Like let's kind of poke in the questions and talk about some of this stuff around what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and kind of question our answers in a sense. So it's more of an open conversation around where we think game design is going to go, and just do it in an open format where you all can listen and kind of see the raw form of how we think about the industry versus kind of a played form of trying to present things that work and doesn't work. So hopefully we can have an open conversation. This is the first time I'm trying to run this format, and we will see how it goes. So first question I have listed here is just to get everybody on the same page here, because there's a lot of chats about play to earn, and what does play to earn even mean. We had play to earn, and then it became win to earn, and then step to earn, and there's all this X to earn stuff happening. And I feel like play to earn has been really coupled with Ponzi-nomics, as people have been kind of saying. And really in reality, I do believe Axie Infinity was considered play to earn, and it switched over to win to earn when they stopped giving out SLP in the adventure mode. So totally correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of like how I see the industry evolving. So I'd like to just kind of go around the table and discuss your opinion on play to earn and the definition on play to earn. So starting with Rich.
Yeah, I think to your point, well, I guess which Rich? But
yeah, we'll do Ready Player Rich. Yeah.
I think to your point, it's a lot of it's gotten extremely convoluted in terms of play to earn, step turn, walk turn, move turn, a lot of the other stuff that's been happening. But essentially, most of those two X to earn, I guess, categories that have come out were straightforward. Do this action and you get paid, right? So like with Axie, it was play a match and you get SLP. With like Step In, it was go run a mile or walk a mile, whatever, and you get X token. The issue, I think, with a lot of that and how it worked out was it was very easy to be botted, taken advantage of, manipulated, and gamed to a point where you had most people that were probably in the early stages benefiting off of new entrants, bringing money in to try to get in and reap those rewards as well. And we saw a lot of those economies kind of just teeter out. And as the markets began to get smarter, people that were trying to stand up those type of games or experiences, we'll call them, the cycles continued to shorten to the point where most of them just aren't going to be successful anymore, I think, in the future. And the biggest issue is that you're able to earn a token or a payment essentially through a game loop that did not have a sink, right? So, like, you had the faucets in this game loop, and there was no sinks or burn mechanisms to pull tokens and build like an actual economy in these games. So I think that's kind of where the Ponzonomics type thing came in, and where that narrative began. Because what ended up happening is the only people that were providing value to these tokens were new entrants looking to create, or the breeders looking to create opportunities for new entrants, and then new entrants coming in and buying those NFTs or access passes to get in and start earning there, which is essentially, as described, the early adopters essentially making money off of new entrants coming in and bolstering those economies. So I think that answers your main question, and I think we'll begin to see a shift away from that and have more economists in the game design itself, paying attention to the flows of tokens and making sure anything that's on chain will have a more well thought out and robust economy that has an expectation of these earners looking to make money, but also building an experience that makes sense for gamers. I do think I've seen recently a knee-jerk reaction to where we've gone from kind of these tokens being used as a user acquisition mechanism and paying these players to complete these actions in the games that kind of create like player liquidity for them. And now I've seen a little bit of a knee jerk of the other side where it's like, okay, well, we need to balance this economy, and a few white papers that I've dove into were like an overbalance of, now we're getting into the territory of, are we penny pinching? Axes shifted very heavily to like runes and charms, which you have to pay to mint them, but that you kind of need them to play, and it's not like an incentive to come in and spend money, but it's more of like a demand, which I think is now on the other end of the extreme, on the other side of play to earn. It's more of like pay to play. So I think we're kind of in this teeter that we're shifting from one side to the other, and we're still trying to find more of an equilibrium around how these economies are designed, and find something that makes sense for a lot of the tokenomics and models that we're working with here.
Cool. Yeah, that I think what bothers me the most about it is kind of the narrative, because when I came into this space, it's, you touched on everything really well, and like for me, it's the marketing side of like I have this game that I'm very interested in, and I would show some friends, and then it would talk about play to earn on their landing page because that was the thing. But now it's just such a negative aspect. And I think you were talking about narrative control recently in one of your tweets about how could we actually market this correctly. And it's like, am I saying play to earn now, or am I saying is it a Web3 game, is it a crypto game? Like, because at the end of the game we're trying to create, I think the genuine players as in game developers here are trying to create good games. And I think the people who have been involved in the industry know how hard it is to create a great game, and that a lot of them fail. I like, in terms of my most recent prior to earnalliance, I was at Jungle Games, and when we would prototype a new product that would go out, it would take between 5 to 8 prototypes just to get one that felt kind of fun, and maybe one gets a soft launch, and then maybe it doesn't even make like global launch, and it's just completely killed. And that's just a lot of feelings and love put into something that just never gets seen. But then all it could take, and I guess the reason why I'm doubling down here is like, all it could take is you just saying the wrong message. I want to make a play to earn game or a crypto game, and people aren't going to show up, and that hurts. So yeah, I definitely think I mean, actually, the question out of curiosity is, what do you have any ideas on what we should say? Like, what is something that would not scare people off, or have you thought much about, like, do we need to just feel like a Web2 game and step back from Web3, or any sort of narratives you've been exploring?
Yeah, I think I obviously I'm not a marketing expert, but I think this is the tough issue. I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day where I was like, well, we should be calling it Web3 gaming, right? And move away from like play to earn or GameFi or some of these others. But if you look at the metrics on like Google search trends, like Web3 is even lower than blockchain, it's lower than crypto, it's lower than NFT. So if we're trying to do marketing and trying to get eyes on it, maybe we shouldn't use Web3 gaming. But on the flip side, NFT has such a bad connotation. Crypto has bad connotations, especially in bears, which we're definitely, I would say, we're in one now. After people have recency bias of losing money playing in crypto and doing all this stuff. So then that begs the other side of the question. It's like, yeah, you might have more eyes on search results and search terms and marketing for amplification purposes, but it might be a negative viewpoint, right? And I think this isn't like an issue native to the Web3 gaming space, but even like cloud gaming, which is fairly new in the Web2 gaming space, um, it's like it's really not a great marketing term. It doesn't sound, I guess, as enjoyable or as something that you're kind of incentivized to go in and check out and start playing. Um, so I hate not having, I guess, a concrete answer, but I've kind of shifted toward just calling things Web3 gaming. I think blockchain gaming is also another good one. It kind of encapsulates most of the types of games that I would stick under Web3 gaming, because obviously the game could just include token or it could just include NFT. So like we don't want to call it crypto gaming. We don't want to call it NFT gaming because those could probably be a little bit more niche than the subject matter at hand, right? Of just blockchain gaming. So those are the two terms that I currently use: blockchain gaming and Web3 gaming. But I would love to see a marketing expert come in and give us something that feels a little bit more akin to what we're working with, right? Whether that is like digital asset or free market gaming or something else that's less corporate and more, um, I guess, makes a little bit more sense for the space, right?
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And I don't know if a marketing expert is going to be able to land it, because like, I started as a guild, and then the guild became tools, and then tools became what earnalliance is today. It's like,
Yep.
I don't know if people could keep up. It's wild. It feels like surfing. So it's so hopping over, like, let's dive into currencies a bit more. Because I find inflationary currencies being a big quote unquote issue of what happened into this negative context of like what Ponzi-nomics are, et cetera. But in reality, like you were saying, we need more economists to kind of get merged into here. And I feel like the gap between the crypto space and game designers coming together, it's a large gap right now. And the more game designers who are interested in coming into this space to tackle these problems is going to be where we start to have more brains actually creating quality games, because there's something different. Like how I kind of look at this is the evolution of when we first started making games, it was just coins. Like if you remember Sonic back in the Sega days, let's say Sega's still around, but back when Sonic had its thing in the heyday, my Sega Genesis was my first console, to tell you the age. I used to pick up coins, right? That's a currency, and those little coins were awesome. They made nice little feelings in my soul when I would hear the little pickup noise and all that other jazz. And then you got games that started opening it up to creating virtual economies where those coins could be traded between people. So we're talking World of Warcraft, MMORPGs, transferring, I farmed some gold, or I got some gold and then I can trade it. But talking about farming, you can farm gold and sell it on the black market, which started becoming a thing. So that was interesting to kind of see the MMOs, evolve, starting with, Lineage when I was playing. And then you have these free to play economies, where people are like, okay, you can be free. You can start buying these tokens. Like we want to sell the tokens, the coins in these currencies. And we want to create these premium currencies versus these soft currencies, and started getting crazy. So I feel like, that's a bit of like context on like currency evolution, very high level, trying to, download this information to everyone. But out of curiosity, and this could be, we just got Rich Robinson back up here. We're just having Twitter space hell today, so hang tight. But what's your biggest fears towards designing it like a Web3 economy or interacting with one, if you're not designing one?
Yeah, I retweeted something from Chris Dixon from A16Z when he talks about the tokens really stepping up when it comes to the bootstrapping problem. And I think that's the challenge, is that finance and blockchain had a baby, and that's DeFi, and then the internet and blockchain had a baby, and that's Web3. And of course, finance and the internet in general do have a Venn diagram where they cross over. But I think that Venn diagram is, it's almost like two circles overlapping almost completely between DeFi and Web3. And I think that's going to, there's going to be some overlap in the future. But the fact is, people don't care, or people don't really want to care. I think in the future, it's going to be just games. I don't know if we have to even call them anything different. Web 2 was called Web 2 back in 2005, probably until 2012. And nobody really says Web 2, much in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think Web 3 will also probably kind of go away. And it's just going to be a tokenized version of games and the internet. And, if I can use a baseball metaphor, I'm American. I apologize. I'm the American. There's 9 innings in baseball, and people say early innings, but I don't think the game has even started yet. Like, there are so few people. If we take 1% of 3.4 billion gamers, that's 34 million people. Like, I don't even think we're anywhere near close to getting anywhere near that right now, and that's going to dramatically change. But how it's going to change is that there's going to be really elegant, very delightful experiences with NFTs and tokens inside games, and we're not going to be focused on earning, because in finance it's all about yield, but in games it's all about fun and escape and challenge, and that's where everything has to really focus on. People only come back to the games for that. And I think it's, step by step with, there are games now that give you NFTs, but you really only, own the NFT if you go out and burn it. And so I think there's some kind of very practical utility around giving out tokens and NFTs to get early users into the game. And then once people can actually realize, oh, I can own this and I can actually trade it, I don't necessarily have to yield it. I mean, think about this. Think about all the possessions that people own. Like how many purchases do you have that yield things? Most people would go through their life without having any objects that yield anything at all. It's all about utility. It's food, which basically immediately, you consume, or it's clothing, which, has some sort of status and identity, but, you might be able to resell it, but you're not going to get, all of your money back. Like even if you have a car that depreciates, unless it's an antique car, and not that many people necessarily own real estate. So I think when we're thinking about like yield as owning NFTs, I think we have to think more about utility and practicality and what this really gives me in terms of basic everyday things like in the real world. And I think there is a way to earn inside games. I think there are a lot of real world parallels between Web3 and the real world. I think Web2 is a very distorted, weird, like not healthy basic economy. If you look, there's so few companies that control everything, and you're like a vassal. You're a thief in these fiefdoms. You're basically laboring in the fields under the house of Zuckerberg and lords of Google and Apple and Activision Blizzard. You're giving all your time, treasure, and data, and you're getting very, very little in return. And all the money and value goes up to the owners and shareholders of those entities. Whereas, of course, with Web3, it's decentralized and it's, everything's being pushed down to the creator and the owner. And it's going to unlock so much value. If you took somebody from that time where we lived in these fiefdoms, thank you, sire, for, I harvested 500 kilos of sweet potatoes. Oh, you can keep 50 kilos and, I won't attack your family. Oh, thank you. Thank you for protecting me. You go from that to a basic, capitalistic democracy where there's property rights, then the world can flourish. And you take somebody from that time into the future and they're like, are you a lord? You have all of your teeth and you can eat non-seasonal fruit and you can fly and watch movies. It's like, no, we've basically created this property ownership, and then that unlocks all of these opportunities inside the economy. So, I mean, I could see that somebody could own a horse, like in the real world, and that's like, say that's like an NFT, and they want that horse. They pay somebody straight up payment to groom it and feed it and trot it around and give it health care and house it. And just like people would farm, wood or gold in World of Warcraft, but then maybe they subsidize that horse by having other people ride it during the week. And, they charge a fee for that. And then maybe on the weekend or maybe one weekend a month, they get on the horse and the horse is just full health, full, ready to go. And they ride the hell out of that horse. And maybe the value of the horse goes up. Maybe it costs them money. Maybe they're subsidizing. So there's people in that, in that whole equation who are getting paid to interact with the horse. Other people that pay to interact with the horse, and then other people who own the horse, and they're either getting a reduced sort of cost each month, or maybe the whole cost is subsidized and it helps them to basically fuel their passion, and then they can even sell the horse or breed it or something like that. And I think that can certainly happen in games. But I think at the core, we have to go back to why people play games. And I think we kind of, have lost a little bit of track of that in the frenzy of like, let's yield. But I think there's going to be so many more new games that are coming out this year that we're not even going to, within a few years, everything's going to have some sort of tokenization, whether it's fungible or non-fungible inside the game. And it's just, it's going to be silly that you play a game without having the ability to own assets in it. I'll stop there.
Right, man. Man, that's like the ethos of all that, I could just start thinking and talking about it all day long. And I mean, I really try not to connect the real world with NFTs because it's like, or just assets, or crypto assets these days, because it's so hard to compare. But I love the analogies that you shared. And for me, I just diving even deeper, like onto the utility. I feel like we were just saying we need to focus on fun. We need to focus on making these things good. But I actually think that the core here is that we actually need more utilities. And for me, like when I first started in the Axie Infinity space and looking at it and seeing this whole breeding concept, which I know there's CryptoKitties and I'm sure there's all kinds of other mini games and many type of ways of like how NFTs and kind of have evolved. But that utility of breeding like blew my mind, because you had like this whole different group of people, speculators, investors, or people who had this value plus interacting in that economy, were kind of feeding and producing the supply in a sense. So that's just one interesting utility that like kind of made me interested in this whole space. But that's not where I think it's all at. I actually think we need to. We got a bunch of background, Rich Robinson. We'll have to mute the mic if you don't mind. But the yeah, so where I was going with that is just the utilities. Like, what utilities are we thinking about? Like for me, I'm definitely looking at battle passes, and I'm looking at creating durability around NFTs, where they only could be used for so much and so long and for X amount of period. But kind of switching over to Rich Cabrera, what are your thoughts on like utilities that you're excited about, or ones that you feel that may not be in the future? Like, will breeding continue or not?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was anything wrong with the breeding aspect of things. I think that was actually great utility for SLP, right? The issue there was it was outside of the main game core loop, which is where you were earning. And there was literally no way for a scholar or renter of an asset to spend the tokens they earned in a healthy way for the ecosystem. They were quite literally forced to sell if they didn't own two axes that they could breed together, right? So essentially, the design of that economy for Axie V2 was designed in a way where if you were not the owner of the assets and you played the game and you earned yourself tokens, the only option you had was to sell. So I don't think inherently there's an issue with breeding. I think that was a game economy and game design issue. Um, and to I guess to your question about different types of utility, yeah, I think battle passes are obviously the most obvious approach towards bringing utility to tokens. I think it's going to vary drastically depending on the type of game that you're designing. So, like, if you're designing an MMO, and this question gets brought up a lot, like, what's the type of token design you're going to use? Single token, dual token, multi token, no token, right? It all depends on the experience that you're building and what makes sense for your specific game. I don't think there's going to be a like, here's the template of successful tokenomics, and everybody just picks it up and runs with it. Because if you're building an MMO where you have all these resources that are on chain and they're tradable, like, you're going to end up having like 5, 10 tokens depending on how many resources you have that people are trading with and interacting with, etc., right? If your game is designed to have different careers that people can play towards and level up with and try, like, spend their time grinding and entertaining themselves with, and the design of your game's tokenomics are, you're kind of relying on the other. So, like, one of the games I was looking at, they have like miners and warriors and builders, right? And like the builder needs
Sorry, what
raw
was the first one you
resources,
said?
like miners or farmers,
Cool.
which have like raw resources, which are given to the builders, which build buildings that create weaponry for the warriors, right? So they're like, now you have this full, like, robust triangle shaped economy where everybody's reliant on each other. And you've already got like 6 different tokens there, right? So, and they all have utility, right? The goal of like an efficient farmer and miner is to make as much excess of crops or mine as many um, or whatever else it is, right? To be able to get it to the warriors or the builders so that they can top the leaderboard of their like farming experience, right? And the warriors will probably be the best like PvP and PvE players that are trying to, protect and get paid by the farmers, et cetera, et cetera. Like you can build these robust economies where like your skill is directly rewarded through your earnings and tokens from people that need your participation in the game, right? Or you can have a very individualized experience, which is more focused around, battle passes and um, kind of like skin-based NFTs and character-based NFTs and customizable aspects of things where you're spending um, kind of for yourself and the player type that you are, whether it's like strategic ads in the game or kind of time saving ads in the games or increasing different aspects of it. So like if I talk to Dead Drop, again, working on the way we're looking at it is like, okay, we have the different player archetypes and we want to one reward them for driving forward the experiences that they want to have and give them the ability to do so, and incentivize them to engage in the economy to help them forward the experience that they're looking to have. So you might have someone that is looking to be flashy, right? They're going to want the coolest looking skins. They're going to want um, the most badass guns, etc., right? So they're going to spend their money to buy those skins. These are the guys that um, always have the newest Fortnite skins or Call of Duty skins or grind for like gold skins, etc. Then you have players who are looking to be more strategic or to be known as like the top players, and they're going to grind for the hardest to achieve items, right? So these are the kind of things that you think through when you're designing, I think, effective and efficient syncs for these utility tokens. And that's the kind of data that you drive from like your beta and your alpha from the players that are participating there to find out, okay, here are my core loops. Here's where each different types of players interacting. And that's where we can have a sync or a piece of the economy that makes sense for our game. I know that was a little long-winded, but
No, it was good, but I think at the end there it was interesting because you just went game designer like lingo with syncs, and you got Elon Musk walking into Twitter with a sync, and it's just like all confusing now, right? But it's maybe Rich Robinson, if maybe you give us an educational piece, a quick one. What is a sync and a producer? Do you know familiar with those terms? Putting you on the spot. Or maybe I'll go for it. But yeah, it's so for syncing and producing, so syncs are like when you have something in the economy, be it a currency or
So
be it a,
sorry, I'm back now. I was trying to post something. on my, but
All good.
you keep going and I'll chime in.
Yeah, cool. So, quick, my 2 cents on sinks and producers for everybody here. It's a term that game designers use when you want to produce something in an economy. So, when we're talking about, like actually farming and getting wood, from the trees, those lumberjacks would be producing wood, I guess you could say. And then if somebody is actually using the wood and burning a fire to stay warm in the winter, those people would be sinking that particular currency or asset. So that's kind of like if wood was a currency, as an example, the producers, the lumberjack, and the sink would be there could be many different sinks, but one sink could be somebody who uses it to make paper, and another person would be using it to make a fire. But just wanted to kind of think about that and say it out loud, because those are key terminologies that make an effective economy. And when you look at games, especially Web3 games, they're even more important, since GameFi, as Rich was saying, Rich Robinson, GameFi has kind of had a baby here with games, or finance has had a baby with games. So yeah, not sure if you had anything you wanted to add to that, Rich Robinson, but
Yeah, certainly. And I think, I think EVE Online, if you look at that game, I'm an older guy, like they hired like a PhD economist 15 years ago. And you can Google sinks and faucets with EVE Online, and you can see basically, it's like you pour water out of the faucet and then it goes down the sinkhole of the sink. And it's basically this, you know, circular economy to be able to have inflows and outflows so that the sink doesn't overflow, or that there's, it dries up and there's no water, right? It's a very simple concept, but it's very likely this year that the world, I'm talking about like the real world economy, is going into recession. And there's been 11 major recessions, at least in the US, since 1950. So in the last 70 years, 11 major recessions, let's call it, a 12th this year. So it's like every 6 years for the last 72 years, there's been a recession. And we're talking about like, governments who have the ability to print money and all of the industry behind it. So economies are hard, and economies have cycles, and economies go up and down just naturally anyway. It's almost impossible to make it so that it doesn't overheat. I mean, you have to constantly add new people in so that they can sell, they can buy things from the incumbents, and you have to have growth. So if you're going to create a game that has some sort of economy, like need it to have an economy, like I think that's very, very, very ambitious in the beginning. I think there's something like 40 billion in in-app purchases. Like I think battle passes are a nice place to, also start, but just kind of swapping IAP for NFTs, just so, oh, I have an in-app purchase, but I own this skin, I own this sword, I own this spaceship, I own this, avatar, whatever. I think that's a very simple way forward. And then there can be a marketplace. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full economy around it, but you can create a marketplace just so people can, just like with eBay, you can sell and get yield back, recoup some of your money from things that you bought, and maybe even earn money if the item becomes scarce and popular. So I think we kind of think that we have to create some kind of full on economy and have your own token. I think in the future it's just going to be unsustainable for people to have. It's like listing a token is kind of like I went public and I also created my own currency in a way, and you're at the whims of all these other people who are looking to the degens that are looking to just flip things and basically get some speculation and pump and dump whatever you've created. I think in the future we're probably going to have some kind of token. Will it be ApeCoin? Will it be a basket of some other fewer tokens? I think it makes sense. I think it makes no sense for people to go and like do their own, for the most part, do their own tokenization if they're really smaller players. I think it's really only the more successful will. And Do you really have to venture into a full-blown economy to do a Web3 game? No. I think some will, but others will just basically enable people to own their own assets. And that's probably good enough to start.
Totally agree with that. Like there is, I think my mom was asking me what I'm doing, and when it started with the whole buying crypto Axes, and I was just trying to describe the whole Pokemon analogy. But I originally bought Axes to essentially lend them to my brother to make money because he got laid off, like a year and a half ago. So she kind of heard about the story, and my analogy was, well, in order to play this game, you need to have three axes. So it's kind of like a CD key. And the cool thing, I'm not sure if people remember CDs and buying games on a CD, or even if we go to floppy disks and all these things. But once you bought something, you could hand it to your friend, and they can use the key and like create essentially like installed on their computer. And this is before multiplayer was like a big thing. This is really early on. But you could essentially resell games. Same for Xbox and PlayStation, discs and all this other stuff, right? But you can't do that now with Steam. Well, I guess they have probably like a transfer system, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't used Steam heavily in a while, but the whole idea of sharing things and owning your assets is kind of like a CD key has been my go-to analogy. But we're almost at the top of the hour. We have a bunch of people that have asked questions. Definitely keen to go through a few of them before we drop. Reason being is I think everybody here is, from a layman's perspective and just a perspective of like trying to understand this world. It'd be good for us to answer as simple as possible of like what this new world is and how it is. So first question, just start with a simple one, is for anybody up here is, which company or studio, without too much bias, do you think is currently the best in game design? It actually doesn't mention Web 2 or Web 3. So maybe favorite game and its design, and what aspect of its design wowed you? Anybody could jump in.
I'm a little bit biased, so I won't say Dead Drop, but yeah, I think it's a tough one, and I think it's kind of to the point that I was mentioning earlier. It's like a lot of these games are so different that their designs are going to vary just drastically, right? Depending on what their game entails, what the objective of the game is itself, and like what you're looking to accomplish as a gamer and why you would interact with those tokens to begin with. So I would just say like any game that is focused purely on utility and I guess incorporating those tokens into the economy as if it were a premium currency instead of as an investment, as something that is staked, or as a mechanism to pay out the players, but as a mechanism to reward, I guess, larger contributions to the game, its ecosystem, and to be used as a utility is kind of what I would look for. What I do look for when reading through some of the white papers and tokenomics.
I'll add some like just Web 2, one of my favorite games. Just talk about one of my favorite games in one of the features that came in, which is a Web 2 game. So Lineage 2, I probably spent 2,000 to 3,000 hours on it, and I probably spent 5,000 hours between StarCraft and Counter Strike each. So definitely a lot of games when I was younger. But Lineage 2 had this castle siege system where you and your alliance, which could be up to about 200 to 300 players, could go attack these castle sieges every 2 weeks, and all these different alliances could essentially sign up to go siege together. And this is back in like the 2000 and like 2005, and I mean, it was epic. Like, just to be on a battlefield with that many people, that alone, that feeling of just going to battle with everyone felt just amazing. So that mixed with like the karma system. So they also had a karma system where if you go PvP somebody in the open and they don't retaliate, you just take them out, you turn red, which gives you a chance to drop your items, your hard-earned items that you might have spent literally months to farm. And we would actually go out and try to attack people in the open before the siege, and then whoever turned red, we would protect them until they turned white again, and they worked off their karma. And for me, I mean, that attracted me as a competitive gamer and somebody who enjoyed that community. So I think game design is very like biased in general. Just to actually go back to it, people have a preference, which comes to our second question here. Since a lot of this is from Hontoro Bit. Since a lot of the gamers have different kinds of preferences, some love 2D, some prefer 3D, some prefer simple games, some love complicated games. How do you make the ultimate game design where a majority of people would play? So maybe we actually got Kevin that just joined up. Maybe we can hear his voice. Welcome, Kevin, to the stage.
Hey, apologies. I had the time wrong by an hour. So I thought I was early.
All
Apologies.
good. Local, that's the global world stuff right there.
Yeah, sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the end of it is, how would you make the ultimate game design where a majority would play? So I guess your opinion on mass adoption game design.
Well, that's like the $1 million question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think there's one game design that's going to reach mass adoption, but I do think, something like you got to compete with Web 2 games. So if you look at, I mean, that's kind of like asking, hey, how do we make the next hit Web 2 game? Really is kind of the question you should be asking. Is it like, is it 45 degrees from an existing game that mashes up a couple of genres? Or is it something completely new? Like what we're trying to do is we're not making a giant bet on gameplay that's never ever been seen before. And like never have players experienced gameplay in this manner, because I think that's too much of a risk, because you've got that on top of the ownership and interoperability innovation risk. So I think my answer to that question is take a really successful game and start there, and then take a few degrees off of that to make it your own, and then add a really great showing of what ownership can do on top of that, and let that be most of where the risk comes in, not having to ask like, is the game fun? Does that make sense? Do you agree?
Yeah, it's more like of a preference. Like at the end of the day, and mass adoption needs to be like, what does that even like mean? Is it because we got 3 billion gamers, they say, on planet Earth? So yeah, that has to kind of be defined. But anybody else want to take a stab? Rich, saw you're coming up.
Yeah. So I guess the question was like, what token design is going to appeal to the largest audience, right? Do I have that correct?
Yeah, it's more like the ultimate game design that a majority would play. So it doesn't actually. It talks more about the preference. So just to repeat it, since a lot of gamers have different kinds of preferences, some love 2D, some prefer 3D, some love simple games, some love complicated ones. How do you make the ultimate game design that the majority would play? So I think it's more raw game design versus having to be coupled with tokens.
Okay. I had I had an answer for the previous one, but yeah, I think Kevin's right. That's like the $1 million question. The thing is like, there's gonna be people that are looking for a casual experience, right? And then there's gonna be people that are looking for like hyper competitive experience, and then everything in between. So if you want to talk about designing a game that has applications or an experience for everybody, you have to be able to hit all sides of that spectrum, including like fantasy and including um, other types of experiences that people look for, whether it's like role playing, FPS, strategy, etc. So I think you're essentially asking like, how can I build a metaverse that has all of these gaming experiences, but has them segregated enough to where one doesn't overlap and ruin the other.
Yeah.
But to the original point that I was going to make was, I think the best economic design or tokenomics design that you can make for a game is one that does not force players or users to buy said token to be able to play the game. Just as free-to-play games today, or most Web2 games today, don't force you to buy a premium currency. They incentivize you to do so. They sort of convince you through the enjoyment of the game and through what you enjoy to do in that game to buy a premium currency to spend it on different assets and games. And I think that is the mass adoption approach towards successful tokenomic design as well.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off what Rich said, and basically, like, you're basically talking about lowering the entry bar, the barrier to entry as low as possible, right? Like, you don't need anything to have a good experience in here. You don't need cash. You don't need a MetaMask wallet. You don't have to know what blockchain is. You can just get in and have a great time. And then there's, ways to enhance your experience beyond that if you want to engage with the Web3 part, the token part, the purchasing part, the cosmetics, right? And I feel like I kind of gave a non-answer to the actual game design question. So I want to go back and make that a little more meaty. I think the components required for a game to succeed in Web3 is, it's kind of like asking another way of asking, like, why make a Web3 game instead of a Web2 game? Because you can make a Web2 game and get mass adoption, right? So why make a Web3 game? And I think the components that need to be in it from the game design side are going to be a big surface area for you to show off what you have, your identity and your accomplishments to other players. So that doesn't have to be PvP, it could be PvE, but there's got to be a large surface area for peacocking, is what we call it in traditional games. Like, you can, roll up in your Ferrari and people go, whoa, where'd you get that? So you need that pretty much needs to be a component, I think. And another one is a creator economy. Like, Web3 games are awesome when the community can contribute to the actual game somehow. And I don't just mean like live streaming. I mean like, hey, let me create for this game. So the game design needs to have an element of a creator economy to it. Like, take Shrapnel, for example. You can make maps in Shrapnel, and the best maps are part of the economy, right? So not everybody's going to want to make maps, but the players who really like to do that can get involved in the creator economy, and there's a formal incentivization loop for them. And so I think the best games are going to have, a nice place for creators to inject their talents into the economy, and a lot of room for flexing, in addition to, your familiar gameplay that everybody loves.
I love it. I love you mentioned the mapping because, as I said at the beginning, I started making StarCraft maps, which taught me how to script, which then got me down the rabbit hole to where I am today. So not only is this just about entertainment in the whole ecosystem of a community, I mean, for me, the reason why I'm here is also hopefully inspire passion and connect people. If it's you're going to, against a castle siege with, your fellows, or if you're, adding to the economy, as you mentioned, in terms of the creator economy. So we're at the top of the hour. Since Kevin just joined, I definitely want to keep going for a few more minutes. But just going to mention here for the Galaxy Proof attendance,
we're going to go ahead and show the tweet in a moment here, Mary, if you don't mind. But for anybody that was here to essentially do a proof of attendance, go ahead and follow the tweet that's going to be highlighted at the top in a moment. And thank you for joining us. But as we keep diving down, we have one more question from the audience, and then I have a general question, kind of a deep fighting question I've been having as a game designer that I want to ask everybody on stage. So let's get the last one from the audience. We got Natalia, if I got that correct, hopefully. Good morning. What features in game design, for your opinion, can attract players and make the game successful? So I know we've been kind of talking about the high level of this question, but the reason why it got chosen, I want to kind of like ask the audience, or sorry, the speakers here, is could you explain it in layman's terms from a game design perspective of what you're working on designing? You know, we were talking about sinks and producers of economies. Is that the most important thing when it comes to a feature in game design? So maybe talk about the aspect of game design that's important, that focuses on attracting or actually making a game successful. What's the most important aspect to making a game successful from a game design perspective? Anybody could jump in.
I have some comments on this one. I mean, this kind of gets into game design 101 a little bit, right? But, you know, one of the classical elements of game design is player archetypes, right? Because everybody, and you know, there's different kinds of games that appeal to different kinds of people, and you want to figure out who you want to appeal to. And like, one of the first questions you ask when you start working on a game is, who's the target audience? And if the people say everyone, you know, ages, you know, 5 to 100, then male and female, you know, the answer is that's bad. You don't want that. You want to have like a target audience. And the four classic game player archetypes are like the killer, you know, I like to blow stuff up and kill people. The explorer, I love to, you know, run around wide open worlds hunting for secrets and stuff like that. Then there's the socializer, who's like, I love to play with other people, get in groups and co-op and PvE and raid. And then there's the achiever, which is like, I just like to collect every last gem and flip over every bush and check every check mark and finish all the stuff. And those are kind of the 4-player archetypes, and you can combine them also. You get the explorer achiever, you get PvP socializer, stuff like that. So, you know, there is no one best game design. You just kind of want to say, all right, we'd like to appeal primarily to, you know, PvP and strategy or something, right? So let's make a PvP strategy game. It's like what a lot of the auto battlers like Illuvium and stuff are doing. Or we want FPS because we want like fast action. We want PvP, multiplayer. Maybe you have guilds if you want a socialization component. So, you know, there's no one answer is basically it, but there's a lot of ways.
Do you have one that you think is a favorite, or most, like, I totally agree, there's no one answer, and it depends on what you're doing, but your personal favorite that you like to work on?
Well, like my player archetype is explorer achiever. I like to explore, I like to achieve, and I like to collect everything, but I'm not huge on like, you know, 50-man groups or guilds or things like that, me personally. But I think like in the Web3 target demographic, there's a lot of PvP. A lot of people like killing people and beating other players in the competition, which is also part of that surface area of flexing that we talked about earlier. You know, it provides a nice surface area when you're in a game with, you know, 6 other people, or, you know, let's say 2 teams of 5, you got 10 people, everyone gets to see all their stuff and their skill. It's a nice Web3 experience, and it also plays into, you know, a couple of those gamer archetypes. So I think PvP games are great for this space, for the Web3 space. Personally, I enjoy more PvE games like, you know, God of War and Zelda and those, Breath of the Wild, which are more PvE. But, you know, those you play through those once or twice, and then you're like, okay, ready for the next thing. PvP games you can play for years, and they'll be around.
Totally.
That's why you need PvPvE, Kevin.
Somehow have to attract both worlds into one.
Yeah, just kidding. So I'll +1 everything Kevin said. I gave my mini player archetype spiel earlier as well, because I think it's obviously extremely important to build experiences for as many archetypes as you can to build as wide of an audience and have that retention. But I'll give a different answer for designing a game that can hit as broad of an audience as possible and bring excitement. I'll reference like a lot of content creators and streamers lately have been complaining about how dull the gaming space currently is right now, right? It feels like a lot of the same stuff. Most of the top games are just battle royales, just different versions and being regurgitated over and over again. And I think what ends up setting new trends is novelty with familiarity. So I recently played a Web2 game beta called Dark and Darker. And it's essentially a medieval extraction battle royale type game where you and a team of 3 enter into a dungeon, and essentially there's like smoke and you get pushed through, but you're trying to collect better weapons and items and get out before the end of the circle, right? So like we all understand how battle royales work. We all understand how extraction shooters work with like Tarkov and some of these other games, but we haven't seen it combined with like the Skyrim like Dungeons of Dragons lore, right? And I think that bit of novelty in that type of experience, where it's like a medieval fighter with swords and mages and archers, combined with the familiarity of extraction and battle royale, is what made it really exciting, right? And I think the reason why this is the best approach for broader, I guess, attention and retention of gamers is there isn't a need for large amounts of education to get someone to understand the game loop, right? Excuse me.
Yeah.
So I think that would be my answer. Is you want novelty, so it needs to feel new, it needs to feel a little bit different, but it needs to be familiar enough to where I don't have to go read an essay to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing.
Super. And I'm glad you mentioned retention. I mean, retention would have been my answer. And everything everyone's saying is like love the ethos of game design here. And I mean, it's for me, like I'm always focused about how to genuinely get people to come back, but at least get people to come back often. And if that is, League of Legends, you got your win of the day. You come back to win at least one game a day, to get your reward. And then you got push notifications, which is like collect your daily chests. And you got this chase of like 10 different chests that, are happening. And then you have actually just people who want to play. So, and I love the novelty as well, because like I've been playing, and you mentioned Web 2 game, and I can't wait till we're just saying I played this game, and it doesn't matter where it's from one day. But for clarity, it's a Web 2 game called BattleBit, and it's 128 versus 128 battlefield. So back to my large, massive, war stuff that I do enjoy. And yeah, it's Minecraft meets Battlefield. It feels like Battlefield in Minecraft graphics, and yeah, that's just it kind of throws me back into not only epicness, but just like the stuff that I loved. But would love to give before I ask my last question, I'd love to give Rich Robinson a chance to chime in. Is there, you're seeing probably so much feed, you know, working at Animoca as the entrepreneur in residence of like different types of, you know, startups and games within this ecosystem. Is there something in particular that you look for as you're kind of listening to those first pitches?
Yeah, so I really loved Kevin's Inside Baseball, and I checked out his 20 years plus of game design experience, and I think I love the four archetypes, and I won't go into the inner workings and sort of like micro side of like game design, but I think from a macro perspective, one thing I was excited. I said at the beginning of this Twitter space about Phantom Galaxies, the AAA game that's going to be launching with Blowfish Studios, our fully owned subsidiary. And I think what they're doing there, they did a lot of really interesting things. Like, for instance, they dropped all the NFTs for free. They did 500,000 NFTs. And to be able to get on the whitelist, you had to do something. You had to play like a mini game. So that kind of it was kind of like a big CAPTCHA in a way, kind of created some air in there. So you couldn't just have like bots or just a whole bunch of whales just snapping up all the NFTs. And then you could take if you have 5 of those NFTs, if you were lucky to get on the whitelist, then you could, burn them and get one, rare NFT. And, the company made some good money on the secondary market and with sales, and created this really strong, robust community that continues to today. And that game's going to launch. And I think there needs to be a game in the AAA space that's a little more, PC centric. And I think eventually there'll be some stuff coming to consoles as well too with Web3 in a meaningful way. But I think writ large, if I really look at macro, it's got to be mobile. It has to be something mobile centric, and it's probably going to be a little bit more, Asia or even, emerging market centric, because as I said, this Venn diagram crossover between DeFi and Web3, like those incentives are still there. And even if, the games are going to be a lot more fun, there's going to be still this like push to bring in some sort of play to earn component. And I think, that's going to bring in a lot of players. I mean, if you look at like 2022 for Web3 games, there was 3 to 5 million wallets, gaming wallets, and maybe just even half of that were, unique players who was really playing all the Web3 games. I mean, I had a guild here in Indonesia where I'm based, and it was mostly, people that were not necessarily gamers that were, really in there to, basically just earn money. And I think that was very lopsided, and it's not going to, continue in that way. But I think they're going, those participants are going to play a very, very big role in the future of Web3 gaming. And I think if I look at what's happening with the response to NFTs in traditional gaming, or in sort of Web2 gaming, there's a lot of pushback, and I think a lot of that is in maybe North America, but I think in Asia there's a lot of acceptance and eagerness to get involved in the fungible and non-fungible token side of gaming. So I think there's going to the company that's able to like create a mobile centric play to earn. I'm sorry, not play to earn, free to play game that is going to be accessible across even lower end Androids and have a strong fun component. I think that's something that's going to be widely adopted in the coming years. And of course, I have 2 teenage boys, and I did a lot of gaming growing up as well too. I don't game as much now anymore, and all the games that we threw out there, like those are amazing, sort of huge productions that are not really accessible by most of the world. So I think if we really want to get widespread adoption, then it's going to have to be something that's mobile centric.
Totally. I loved all the examples. So 10 minutes. I'm going to try to cap this at 10 minutes. One last question, because this is kind of more personal to me. On not only, I know Kevin didn't get to introduce himself at the beginning, but Rich Robinson kind of just called it out. He has a vast amount of experience. He's truly, in my opinion, one of the gods that exists in game design, and I'm super super humbled to have him have him have us and have him be here today. So for me, like personally as a game designer, I started with modding MMOs and really building exactly what I love. And I was building literally the games that I love all the time. And then I followed mobile. So kind of following that stuff, Facebook games were coming live. And then I started making mobile games because I was like, this is back in 2010. So it wasn't as competitive, and it was a good place to start growing. And this is during the Facebook gaming waves where Zynga, started taking over and all this other stuff. And I went down this rabbit hole of designing games on mobile. I mean, I personally don't play until Clash Royale came out. I was not into mobile games at all. You would not see me do an in-app purchase. You would not see me like actually like playing it. But I was making mobile games 60 to 80 hours a week, even though I was making stuff that I don't play. And eventually, made a few hits, and then I dove into real money casinos, and that felt like I dove into like a no judgment, but I just personally didn't like it. I felt like I was swimming in mud because it's real money gambling, and that was extremely successful too, but at a scale that kind of made me question everything. And I took a break from game design because of that, because I really felt like I went down a path of making games that I personally didn't want to make, but I was decent at figuring out the designs of it. So my question to Kevin and Rich Cabrera, and especially since now we're in Web3, which we probably are not playing Web3 games because there's nothing that we're inspired by. Today we're kind of starting something from scratch. So more about like, do you have any stories that resonate of like, A, do you believe you need to be designing something you want to play every day as a designer, or do you think you can find
So,
enjoyment of designing something on your own?
yeah, I mean, if you want a career in game design, the answer is easy. You have to find enjoyment in designing games that you do not love to play. Is that my microphone? Sorry. Oh,
No,
sorry.
Rich
Okay.
Robinson just got to mute the background noise.
Okay. There you go. Cool. Yeah. So you have to find enjoyment in that, because it's actually pretty rare. If you consider a full career in game design, it's going to be rare that you get to work on the games you love. There will probably be one or two of them that you're like, this is the game for me. Like, this is exactly what I want to play. And sometimes your first job is that you're like, well, I wanted a job. I love playing World of Warcraft, so I applied at Blizzard, and bam, I got a job on the team, and they hired me right away, kind of thing. You see a lot of that. And sometimes you can keep that going for a while. But like, I mean, I worked on Solitaire for the last 10 years. And I mean, it was awesome because there were a billion players playing it. But, I didn't rush home and play Solitaire. That my wife did all the time, but that wasn't my game. But I still had plenty of joy just touching that many players' days and their lives. And it was awesome. So, I definitely don't need to love the game that I'm making, but when you find that and you get to work on a game that you do truly enjoy, you're just going to be thinking about it all day when you're not working. You're like, it's the way to get the most passion out of designers.
Yeah, I'll also say I think some of the best moments where we're thinking about like what we would enjoy going through in the game um, is like where you find the most enjoyment for other people as well. So especially if it's a genre that you're designing for that you're a massive fan of or spend a lot of your time in, you're probably going to know where the pain points are or have the ideas of like, oh, it would be cool if this was added here, right? So while I don't think it's a necessity, I do think it helps a lot on that side of things. And then also, passion can't be undervalued.
Yeah, and I feel like that's you kind of said like when it happens, it's almost like a magical moment, you know, like when you do create that game. Because when people do set off to make games, it's not just the designer; you have the team too. You know, you have the engineers, you have the artists, and I really do try to match people up with that vision. Like, are they doing something that they're gonna love doing? But it's sometimes some people are there for the job, some people are there for the people, some people are there for the passion, and they got lucky just like I had in terms of making maps and finding out that I love scripting and stuff. So I feel like that's what we're also up against, and I wanted to bring it up because we're up against, you know, that chance of like that magic happening where people do come here to Web3 and design something magical with the right people. Rich, you wanted to add some?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm probably the oldest guy on here, and you know, I'm on my second current and final marriage, and it's really working. But you know, half of marriages end up in divorce, and the other half are probably unhappy. So the odds are kind of against you. So you got to choose well, and passion is not what drives that, right? And I think it's nice to have something that's passionate that you're really passionate about. But I think one of the most, you know, it's great if you're, as a serial entrepreneur myself, I have a team that's really passionate and I can kind of like leverage that, and they're passionate about the mission and vision and whatever else, maybe their exact job spec. But you know, that's not the fuel. Basically, you know, in a good solid relationship as like marriage, you have to get like really good at some of the, you know, mundane stuff, and really kind of enjoy the journey. So I don't want to discourage anybody here who's like feeling, you know, you shouldn't be miserable, but you shouldn't also be like, wow, I don't feel really passionate about what I'm doing. Like about the game itself, you have to be passionate more about the process. Like, you know, Kevin talked about, hey, I'm having a billion people relax and, you know, shut their brains off and have a little fun or connect with other people. Like that's the mission and vision, and not exactly, you know, the entire game. And even if you're working on a game that you love, you know, probably you're not doing shit that you love every day either, right? So I think, you know, that whole follow your passion thing, I think, is one of the, you know, shittiest pieces of advice. But if you can find some passion in there, that's a nice bonus. But yeah, that's my grumpy old man in the balcony of the Muppets. If anybody even gets that reference, 2 cents right there.
I think to pile on to that, you know, I think that, you know, it's a lot of artists will say, hey, if you're going to be an independent artist, you do you, you know, don't let anybody tell you how to make your art, what to do. You need to make art that appeals to you. And if it touches someone else, beautiful, right? But you're not really making art for other people. At least from what I've heard, I'm not a solo artist, so, but I've heard some really great artists say, you know, don't let other people influence your creativity. In game design, it's a little different because it's more like, you know, you're kind of like a conductor. And so you've got a whole orchestra to conduct, and you're trying to bring it all together and, you know, and bring this whole team together and get everybody excited and make this product that's just going to sing and sound great. And you're not going to, you know, it's going to be hard for you to love every piece of that. And you don't want to follow the solo artist advice of like, don't let anybody tell you what to do. It's your game. Like that's not gonna, I mean, that might be great as a solo passion project, but if you're trying to make, you know, a game as a service and a business where like, hey, we got to be profitable at the end of the day so that we can make the paychecks and do another one of these ultimately, you know, you have to appeal to the target audience, so you do have to care what they want.
I think you're right, Kevin. I think, you know, the artist, there's an aspect of that. But if you think about like Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, you know, really prolific, you know, accelerator, he's like, the number one rule of startups is just make stuff people want. Just make stuff people want. And it's really simple, but it's not easy. And that's why most startups fail, because they're unable to make stuff that people want. And I think the same with games. They're unable to make games that people really want. So it's always got to go back to the user. It's user centric and not really about you necessarily. So you have to find out how you can be incentivized. And I mean, for me as an entrepreneur, like I just love the whole journey of it. And I love all of the ups and downs and building something from nothing. And whatever that ends up being, I want it to be mission and vision aligned, but it's pretty miserable along the way. That's really the fact, that most things are kind of a grind and they suck, and you should have like some kind of bigger vision driving you rather than some sort of internal passion, I think.
Yeah, in my experience, the number one like thing you look forward to getting up every morning and makes you excited to go to work is when you find a good team. When you find a good team, I mean, unless you're working on a game you hate. If you're working on a game, you're like, I don't love this game, but it's okay. But you've got a great team. Going to work every day is just going to be awesome. Building a game together with the people who are respectful and humble, and there's no egos, and you get in a groove working together. It's just awesome. Having worked on several games like that.
That's the best, man.
Yeah, and if I may, there's just like one last thing, and I have to bounce. Is Ray Dalio from Principles, his book Principles, he talks about meaningful work and meaningful relationships. Like, and I also teach an MBA course, and I'm like, why are you guys here? You can get money, you can get status, you can do impact, you can get power or whatever, but none of that really is the final destination. The final destination is relationships. We're all here for relationships, and all those things can feed into the ability for us to have better relationships. So I will leave with that. And thanks for inviting me in. I really appreciate it, Coop.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I think that's a great final note, is that we just all started our relationship here today on this space. So I'm not sure, if this was something interesting to the crowd. So definitely reach out, DM me, tweet, do whatever you can. Let me know if you want me to continue finding great people like the people that were on the stage today to have these open conversations about game design, because I think it's important for us to get educated about this, especially since assets and yielding in this Web3 space of like responsible quote unquote development and responsible quote unquote gaming in a sense is something we need to explore together as things evolve, because there's going to be so much coming out this year. And talking about the industry and just being happy with the job, I wake up like today, I'm like so stoked to do this. And also got to mention kind of a biased cop out here is that earnalliance is publishing a game. We actually just released the trailer a few minutes ago. I've been waiting to show this trailer for like months. So we'll go ahead and outro out with some music. Mary, go ahead and sing that dance, and we'll show the trailer at the top. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Really do appreciate it. Rich, Kevin, and the other Rich, who's gone now. Thank you so much.